Reading is an activity that is encouraged in the world and also in the Christian faith. We have our spiritual book, which is the Bible, and then we have other books that are encouraged to expand on Christian theology. But I think there is one genre of books that is quite overlooked when it comes to growing in your faith. That is Christian fiction. What is Christian fiction? How does it differ from other non-religious fiction, and does it even help people in their walk with Christ? But before we get into all that, I'd like to welcome you to Based on Faith, where I talk about books based on my faith in Christ. So what is Christian fiction? There are varying definitions of what Christian fiction is, or rather, what it is not. Goodreads says that a Christian novel is any novel that expounds and illustrates a Christian worldview into its plots, its characters, or both, or which deals with Christian themes in a positive way. Many novels with Christian themes also fall into specific mainstream fiction genres. In North America, the Christian novel has evolved into a specific genre of its own, written explicitly by and for Christians of a particular type. Such a Christian novel does not have to involve an actual event or character in Bible history. A very popular Christian fiction author, Francine Rivers, says that if you pull out the Christian thread from the plot and the plot unravels, it's Christian fiction. And to me personally, Christian fiction is a genre for books that are based on the Christian faith. And they range from latent Christian fiction to evidenced Christian fiction. And what do I mean by that? There is this popular quote by C.S. Lewis on The Way to Write Christianity that says, what we want is not more little books about Christianity, but more little books by Christians on other subjects with their Christianity latent. So by latent Christian fiction, I mean books that don't seem like a Christian book until you look deeply into it and you see that they are based on Christian values. And then when I say evidence Christian fiction, I mean books that you pick up and you know that this is definitely a Christian fiction book. And an example of books like that would include Redeeming Love by Rivers, Commission The Awakening by Susan Vales, and Laurie Weeks books. I think most of Laurie Weeks books are like evidenced Christian fiction. And an example of latent Christian fiction books would include To Bind Fire that I recently reviewed and Chronicles of Narnia, which I'm currently reviewing. So how does Christian fiction differ from other genres of fiction? First, by publisher and label. A lot of books are categorized as Christian fiction because they are published by faith-based publishers like Tyndale, Zondervan, or Baker House. I personally do not look into who published a book before classifying it as Christian fiction, but that's generally the rule. Another way a book can be classified as Christian fiction is by looking into the themes. If it incorporates Christian themes, Christian theology, or Christian social norms, then it typically is Christian fiction. And these books tend to not be explicit, but they can tend towards that in terms of goriness or perhaps a steamy kissing. And steamy kissing, an example of that would be Redeeming Love. I remember the first time I read it, I was like, what is going on here? And for goriness, I think Decker is an author who is known for writing some gory scenes in his books. And an example of that would be House, that you co-authored with Dereti, who wrote Into the Present Darkness. So I'm looking there because I have House in my TBR and I hope to read it very soon. And so from these examples, you can see that Christian fiction actually has a few subgenres on its own. So we have the Christian fantasy subgenre, and some example of books in this include the Circle series by Ted Decker, the very popular Chronicles of Narnia and Mark of the Raven, etc. This subgenre is one I'm recently getting into, and I am honestly really excited about discovering more books in this subgenre because it seems like a gem that has been hidden from me and that I just found, and I'm just like, fantasy worlds are just fantastical. And I'm really excited to read more Christian fantasy books. And if you have any one that you would recommend, please put them in the comment section. Another subgenre that is very popular is the Christian historical subgenre. So these books are typically either based around biblical fiction or biblical characters. And an example would include Sons of Encouragement, A Lineage of Grace, or Adasa One Night with the King. Or they might be based in a biblical time period like Mark of the Lion series. Or they can be based on recent history, but it's typically American or European history. And an example of fiction in these books include Laurie Weeks books like The Princess Sophie's Art, Kensington Chronicles, The Zimra Chronicles by Susan Vales. I think this is not supposed to be placed under historical fiction, but rather biblical fiction, but I'm going to confirm that. And the AD series by Decker. What am I saying? Okay, so Zimmer Chronicles and AD series are supposed to be in biblical time periods, not in the recent American or European historical fiction. I botched that up. Please forgive me. Or excuse that. And the other subgenre that is very popular when it comes to Christian fiction is Christian romance. I think the first novel I read was a Christian romance novel. So it's a very popular subgenre. And these are typically love stories with the characters having faith in God. And they're typically like wholesome and very beautiful. Most of them have like happy endings. And then we have Christian mystery and Christian thriller. Examples of Christian thrillers would include House and This Present Darkness by Peretti that I mentioned earlier. So like I said earlier, I was first introduced to Christian romance. Most people, when you say Christian fiction, they think immediately of Christian romance, but it's way more than that. There's like so much to be discovered in the Christian fiction genre. And this is going to bring me to my third question, which is Christian fiction biblical? And to that, I'm going to say yes, because we know in the New Testament, Christ told a lot of parables. And I want to believe that these parables were not like real life stories of actual people, because I think this is something that just came to my attention recently, that some people believe that the parables are real life stories of people. And I'm like, no. It seems like they're allegories that is simply using to drive across a point. Actually, let's look up the meaning of parable, because I can't believe. Do you think that the parables were real life stories? Because the definition of parable alone makes me go, okay, this is fiction. Parable means a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson as told by Jesus in the gospel. So it's a moral story. It's an allegory. That's what I understand by it. And going off of that, we can see that Jesus used fiction so many times to like pass across a point or to illustrate certain morals that we should have as Christians, or that we should have as followers of Christ, since the word Christian did not exist then. And from BibleStudyTools.com, we see that these parables served as timeless lessons, inviting us to reflect on our lives, relationship, and spiritual growth. And honestly, that is what Christian fiction does for me. I don't know what it does for other people, but when I read Christian fiction, it helps me reflect on my life by looking into the lives of the characters I'm reading about, by looking into their relationships and looking into how they grow as Christians. It helps me reflect on that and go, okay, Faith, you should be doing XYZ in your walk with Christ. You should not be doing that. Or it helps me see myself in them. And I've talked about this before, that it's not just the good characters I see myself in. I also see myself in the questionable characters, because I'm growing in my walk as a Christian. And if I choose to believe that I'm perfect in my walk with Christ, then I am really not, I'm going to be staunching my spiritual growth, because there is always room to grow in. And Christian fiction really opens my eye to see the room that I need to grow in a lot. And now to my fourth question, how does Christian fiction help my walk of faith? What it basically does for me is that it widens my imagination and the way I understand certain concepts. I was recently watching one of my earlier book reviews, and I was talking about how, even before I even started thinking about the whole Christian fiction, Christian non-fiction, the difference in how they helped me grow in my faith, I said something that really resonated with present faith. I said that non-fiction books do not allow my imagination to go to places as fiction books do, but non-fiction books are still books that I need to read nonetheless. And I just find that, the way Christian fiction in general, the way fiction helps you widen your imagination. With non-fiction, they're just giving you facts points. And honestly, non-fiction authors a lot of times use stories to like drive across certain points, and it also causes me to reflect. And honestly, this need for reflection is one of the reasons why I keep posting my review videos, because it makes me reflect on the books I read, so that I'm not simply just consuming them, but I'm actually absorbing what the book has for me. I have to take maybe 30 minutes to a few hours after each book to think about it. If I'm reviewing it, that is to think about it and go, how exactly did that book make me feel? What exactly did that book teach me? What subconscious messages did I take from that book, or might I have taken from that book? And honestly, that's something that I really recommend that people do when they read like their more serious fiction books and maybe even non-fiction books, because it just really helps so that you're not just wasting your time. I know there are books we read that are just popcorn reads. Whenever I'm reading a book that I am reading just to pass time, I call it a popcorn read. But when I'm reading it seriously, like, when you read those serious books, I would really recommend that we take the time out to like just reflect on how the book made us feel or what we took on from it. One Christian fiction book that I recently enjoyed is Commission The Awakening by Susan Vales. And one that I'm currently reading is The Whispers of the Wind by Abigail G. Thompson. With that, I've come to the end of today's video. If you want to see more Christian book reviews, subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you can get notified when I post those book reviews, because I review a lot of Christian fiction and Christian non-fiction books. With that, I'm going to say have a wonderful rest of your day.